Reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus said to his disciples, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He takes away every branch in me that does not bear fruit, and every one that does he prunes so that it bears more fruit. You are already pruned because of the word that I spoke to you. Remain in me as I remain in you. Just as a branch cannot bear fruit on its own unless it remains on the vine, so neither can you unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever remains in me and I in him will bear much fruit, because without me you can do nothing. Anyone who does not remain in me will be thrown out like a branch and wither. People will gather them and throw them into a fire, and they will be burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask for whatever you want, and it will be done for you. By this is my Father glorified, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord. Risking my life here today, moving that thing around with melted wax at the top. You'll see, don't worry. A few months ago, I was at my parents' house, and I looked out the backyard, and I noticed that the grapevines were a bit scraggly. So, being the good son that I am, I told my dad, I said, "You need to get out there and prune those things." I offered to help. He has about 100 grapevines, and we went out there, and I really didn't know what I was getting into, and I asked him what he wanted them to look like when they were finished, because when we got out there, I mean, it's all last year's growth, and it's like looking at this. You're like, what do I do? You know, I don't know what to take out of it. So basically it came down to this. There's two vines that come off of the roots, and at the top, we basically wanted one branch coming off of one going this way, and one branch coming off the other going that way. So, you know, real simple, but I'm sitting there thinking, like, out of all of this, you want me to come up with two single branches? Like, wow, how am I going to do that? But, you know, I'm staring this thing down, and I said, well, okay, follow it back. If I cut that branch right there, then all of that disappears, and it's done in about 2 cuts, right? Real simple. But that's really hard to do when there's somebody else's vines. You know, take a risk like that. So I'm thinking, well, why don't I start here? Snip, maybe a couple leaves here, you know? Like, that's just not going to cut it. And eventually, you know, you get all the way back to it, and you're like, son of a gun. Like, I should have just made that cut that I saw at the beginning. And just cut out the whole stinking thing, you know? But I got better and better as I moved down the row, and, you know, while at first I couldn't bring myself to make those huge cuts, you know, by the end of it, I knew what it was supposed to look like, because I had done a few before with a little extra work. And I could picture it in my mind, and then when it came down to it, it was just snip, snip, snip. Oh, okay, it's done. This same experience of trimming, pruning grapevines happens in our relationship with God too. There's a reason Jesus uses this imagery. And, you know, we think sometimes I can't possibly make such a big cut out of my life. I can't possibly, you know, make such a drastic change as maybe I'm being asked to make. I can't cut all of that stuff out of my own life. I'll give it a little snip here, a little snip there, enough to make it look different. You know, I'll even pray every now and again, and you know, I'll go to Mass once in a while, and even give a little money to charity or the church, but I can't let myself be pruned as severely as I'm being asked to. There's some grapevines behind the roadhouse, you know, the one next to the new driveway, and I don't think they've been pruned in a couple of years, and I went out there the other day, and I was looking at them, and I said, man, I'd like to prune those things. But I don't even know where to begin, because it's been a while. There's a lot of growth. And that's the thing. The business of pruning is an ongoing task. It's not just a one and done. In fact, even throughout the growing season, there's some pruning that's beneficial for the branches to bear better fruit. If the vines grow untamed and growth continues in many different directions, all its energy goes into producing more vine, and very little goes into producing fruit. Have you ever seen wild grapes? Actually, I don't think I've ever seen wild grapes. I've seen wild grape vines all over the place, but I don't think I've ever seen wild grapes, because they need to be pruned so some of that energy and sugar goes into producing fruit. There can be many leaves and the vine might look huge, but there will be no or little fruit. So the same too for us. When we go too long without being pruned, we get a poor crop of fruit. And the task of pruning, so as to be able to bear fruit, seems much too harsh. It seems overwhelming. It seems like it's not worth it. But thank goodness Jesus says that we have already been pruned. We've been pruned by the word that he spoke to us, just as the disciples were pruned by that same word. Because it's tough. It takes a discerning eye and some skill to determine what needs to remain after the pruning. And even if you've done the major pruning on the vine, it can be tough to decide what more to cut off. Part of the fruit-bearing branch, maybe even a blossom for more fruit. Some leaves, take away some of the shade. But in the continued pruning, we get better fruit. See, there's people here, there's people always here. Some who get pruned all the time. There's some who don't feel like they remain in the Lord at all. At the same time, we're all over the spectrum. Some who feel cut off, thrown out into the fire, and some who maybe feel the connection to the Lord but are so overstretched and their growth stretches out in every which way that they aren't really bearing good fruit at all. They're running this way and that, maybe even taking care of some decent things like family and work and whatever. But it's taking away from an opportunity to let fruit be born in their lives. But for all of us, no matter where we are on the spectrum, whether we've been pruned recently or continue to be pruned or in need of a major pruning, our reminders are the same from Jesus today. To remain in him and to bear much fruit. How do we do that? What does it really mean? Jesus speaks these words in the context of the Last Supper. It's no coincidence that he's using the image of grapes in the midst of giving them the wine of salvation and instituting the Eucharist. This is a sacramental thing. He's giving us a command to remain in him through the sacraments, especially the Eucharist. We need our focus on them, on the sacraments, and the communion and the conversion that they bring us. Remaining in Jesus, and when we're dead or we're that diseased branch that the Father's going to cut off, to return to him in confession. See, Jesus reminded us that we're already pruned. We have the form of the vine with a branch. We might need a lot of pruning, but we were already once, at least, at our baptism or maybe at significant points of conversion along the way. But it's the ongoing pruning taking place throughout all the growing seasons of our lives that needs to happen. We need to be connected to the Scriptures daily. When we let God's Word dwell in us, and we remain connected through the sacraments, we don't fear when all we see is that bare vine and a lonely branch off the side. We don't fear the major pruning that needs to happen when it's gone on too long without it. Because we know the sweetness of the sap that runs into the branch. We know that it's going to cause growth that's life-giving and nourishing in all the areas of our lives. With God's life in us, and as our first focus, fruit will be born in all that we do. And we'll choose to live and act and participate in areas and activities that are prone to bring life to the world. He says, ask whatever you want and it will be given to you. Because nourished with the divine life, you'll know how good it is and you'll seek the things that do bear fruit already. So what is it to bear fruit? St. John tells us in the second reading that it's to love as God loves, to sacrifice for the good of others, time, energy, money, whatever it is. And we may have to cut something out of our lives so that we can do more good for others. We may have stems that are fruitless, and we may have to cut some off. But to have a few stems weighted with much fruit is better than having an overgrown vine with no fruit. To have our energies extended into so many different areas of life that we can't focus on what matters. But Jesus is speaking to his apostles and to us too about a different kind of fruit. A fruit that's also an invitation to others to the same life-giving word and sacrament that we have experienced. To invite others to hear the good news of Jesus Christ and to be grafted on to the true vine that he is. You know, in a little while, in a few weeks, or hopefully really soon, you're going to hear about another opportunity to participate in discovering Christ that many of you have heard such good things about. And I was just thinking about it, that it's such a great opportunity for us to be pruned again, to hear God's word in the midst of his community and drawn into his sacraments, but also to bear fruit at the same time. You know, consider attending when you hear about it. Consider attending and inviting someone else to come with you. You know, it's just something about, I think for a long time in the church, we haven't really known what it is to bear fruit in that way, inviting others to conversion, inviting others to see a life transformed in Jesus Christ. And one of the things that's so good about this series, this process, this opportunity, is just that. It gives us a form for just that sort of bearing fruit. A place to invite others to experience the same transforming way of life that we have. One of the biggest things that helped me on the vine when I was actually pruning real grapevines, and helps us in life, is to see what it's like to be pruned. You know, when I finally had an image in my mind of what this is supposed to look like, it was a lot easier to get to it. It was a lot easier to be confident in it. And it's another thing that we need as Christian disciples, is to see examples of others who have been pruned, sometimes in a drastic way, and to witness the fruit that's born in their lives. And it's another thing that's good about discovering Christ, but it's another thing that's just good about living a healthy Christian life, is joining in relationships with people who have borne fruit. So, you know, discovering Christ is an opportunity to see what the pruned vine looks like and how it bears fruit, but it's also something that we should be doing in our daily lives. So I just encourage you to connect with others who are here. Sometimes the fruit is evident. Just as people pass through this building, you can tell there's something different about this person. You know, their life, it's almost like they're just walking around bearing fruit. So connect with other people and you know, see how lives are transformed when people remain in Jesus, when they are pruned by the Word, when they live a life that's so connected with Him that their lives bear much fruit.